What's up, everyone? We here at False Swipe Gaming are people of simple pleasures. We like video games, and more specifically, we really like Nintendo video games. And even more specifically than that, we like Pokemon and Super Smash Bros. I know, crazy, right? As it turns out, there are quite a few people who like both those series. And if you haven't heard already, the most ambitious crossover in Nintendo-developed games is here. Wolfe Glick's Pokemon Sword and Shield Super Smash Bros. Invitational. We invite you to go check out Wolfe's trailer for the event, which should be kicking off in the date and time listed on screen. The event is going to feature 8 different Smashers, some of them pros, some of them Ludwig, competing against each other with help from 8 world-class level Pokemon VGC players. And of course, as big fans of Wolfe and big fans of Smash, we were over the moon when we heard about this event. But it also got us to thinking, just how well do competitive Smashers understand Pokemon? Is the power of playing one Nintendo game enough to translate to an entirely different series? Well, if you've watched Hug's stream anytime in the past few months, you probably already know that the answer is no. Both Smash and Pokemon contain absurdly arcane interactions that are hard to understand or even see happening from a casual spectator's perspective. But through routine thrashing, Hugo climbed all the way up the ladder to top 100, proving the crossover is possible, and cementing himself as a possible favorite in the running for the first ever season of Wolfe Glick's Pokemon Sword and Shield Super Smash Bros. Invitational. So now we're here for all the Smashers who want to understand Pokemon without losing in front of their viewers over and over again. Without any further ado, this is the Smasher's Guide to Competitive Pokemon. To even start explaining how competitive Pokemon works, we have to address the different ways you can play competitive Pokemon. Pokemon has singles and doubles just like in Smash, but unlike Smash, doubles isn't a cooperative version of singles, as you don't team with an actual person to play it. Rather, competitive doubles is its own entire metagame based around double battles, using 2 Pokemon controlled by the same player. In fact, doubles is the officially endorsed metagame by the Pokemon Company, a format known as VGC, or Video Game Championships. In Smash, while singles and doubles might have different strategies, doubles is still essentially a team version of singles at its core. Pokemon doubles, on the other hand, is wildly different from singles, with many strategies and moves intended almost solely for doubles use, and other single strats failing completely. As such, the two are almost like different games, more akin to the separation between games in a Smash series than the separation between singles and teams. Of course, just like in Smash, there are players who excel in both formats, but VGC and singles have communities that are often quite separate, and learning one format after mostly playing the other can be extremely difficult. The most obvious change between singles and VGC is obviously that you have 2 Pokemon on the field, which has a dramatic effect on many moves. You can pair a Pokemon that uses Earthquake with a flying Pokemon that won't be hit, for example, but doubles in Pokemon also facilitate some moves that don't see any use in singles, such as Helping Hand or Follow Me, which would be the equivalent of helping your teammate convert on a combo or saving them from an edge guard. Singles and VGC also differ in just the amount of Pokemon used. While competitive singles features a full team of 6, VGC rules have players bring a roster of 6, but then choose 4 Pokemon to use. In both formats, you see your opponent's team beforehand, choosing your leads, or the Pokemon you'll start with. So this process is somewhat akin to double blind picking what character you'll play game 1 of a Smash set, just with more info than if you're facing some random in bracket. In addition, Pokemon in VGC are all set to 50, while competitive singles takes place at the level 100 mark. There's a host of other differences between singles and doubles that we'll get to later, but those are the basic disparities. Wolfe Glick's Pokemon Sword and Shield Super Smash Bros. Invitational will feature players participating in the VGC format, but we're still going to cover aspects of singles and doubles in this video. So some of the following terms might apply more to one format than the other, or even function differently, but we'll do our best to keep it general and let you know if something is specific to one format. After all, it's still Pokemon, and the building blocks are, at the base level, the same between singles and doubles. And speaking of building blocks, in Pokemon, the very start of your characters might be one of the most complex parts. We're going to assume that you know at least the basics of Pokemon, so type matchups, items, etc. But just knowing about these things isn't equal to utilizing them effectively. Just like each Smash character has different innate strengths and weaknesses, different Pokemon are suited for different tasks. What sets the two apart is how customizable every Pokemon is, and how that both expands their possibilities and limits them. Each and every Pokemon also has its choice of item, nature, movesets, and sometimes even ability. All of these aspects do different things. Natures alter stats, while moves, items, items and abilities affect how a Pokemon even functions in battle. Here's a big part of where Pokemon and Smash differ. While every Marth has the same nominal potential, a Pokemon is limited in what it can do compared to other Pokemon of the same species, because it won't have the same moves, abilities, or items. We can take a look at one of competitive Pokemon's current top dogs, Dragapult, to get the full picture. A quick look at Dragapult's stats show an overwhelming speed and physical attack, leading you to think that Dragapult might be played with moves like Dragon Dance, the signature Dragon Darts, and Phantom Force. And sure, you can play Dragapult that way, but it just so happens that it has a much more impressive special move pool, meaning a large portion of the Dragapults you run into might be running Draco Meteor and Fire Blast instead. Of course, you could run both sides, but because you have a limited amount of stats and moves to dole out, you'll be sacrificing efficiency to be a jack of all trades. And those aren't the only two ways to play Dragapult either. It can also play as a supportive set using Light Screen and Reflect to help its teammates set up. Dragon Darts has smart targeting in doubles, for example, making running a physical set more attractive. And then your Dragapult might want to invest in the ability Clear Body, which will deal with all the Intimidators running around in doubles trying to drop its attack. However, Dragapult can never do any of these things all at once, but crucially, you might not know which version you're facing until the opponent uses a move. Let's say you're fighting a Fox player in Melee. If the Fox player is decent at all, you'll have to be prepared for almost every technique in their arsenal, whether it be Shine Spikes, Up Throw Up Air, and Laser Camping no matter what. While the Fox player might be predisposed to some of these techniques, they still have access to all of them and can adapt and change. In Pokemon, any given Pokemon will not be able to do every single thing available to that species, but because you don't know what they might have yet, you still often have to be prepared for all the possibilities of a Pokemon until the opponent reveals their strategy either on their own or because you forced them to. Pokemon is in many ways a hidden information game, and finding ways to learn that information is often the key to success. There are certain sets or moves that are so unoptimal that you'll rarely see them, and new techniques will often spread quickly. Of course, a Pokemon player might have preferences for certain playstyles or movesets, just like a Smasher would. The game is still about using the techniques you enjoy to win at the end of the day, and knowing your opponent is a valuable nugget of knowledge. You can find information about moves, items, and even natures in any Pokemon guidebook, or even in-game. But any Smasher worth their salt knows well that the basics are never the full story. There's a virtual library of terms you have to learn to understand high-level Smash, and some of them aren't even in the game. Whether it's pivoting, wave dashing, glide tossing, or B-reversing, every game has its fair share of esoteric techniques that the game doesn't outright tell you about, and that casual players probably don't even know exist. Sometimes the games seem like they go out of their way to make it as obscure as possible. Why does Smash Ultimate's in-game manual acknowledge directional influence, but call it hit stun shuffling? The world may never know. While competitive Pokemon's techniques aren't executed in the same way, they are just as invisible and have just as great an impact. Every Pokemon has a set of stats known as individual values and effort values, or IVs and EVs for short. If you've ever looked into competitive Pokemon even once, you've probably caught wind of these. They're essentially the hidden math that determines what a Pokemon excels at and where it has weak points. Just as a Smash player can express themselves through movement, a Pokemon player can put their own unique spin on their squad by customizing them with thought and an eye towards innovation. For example, let's turn to Pokemon's only multiple-time world champion in Ray Rizzo, who won 3 years consecutively from 2010 to 2012. Ray's second-time world champion team included a Thundurus, which in itself wasn't surprising at all. Thundurus was a mainstay throughout the 2011 season for its combination of supporting utility and fast attacking power. But Ray flipped everything on its head by foregoing the usual offensive build and instead bringing a highly defensive Thundurus, a masterstroke that allowed his Thundurus to stay on the field longer and forced his opponents to make suboptimal plays because they didn't know what to expect. EVs and IVs may not even be as immediately visible as many of Smash's hidden techniques, but they're some of the core of intelligent team building and paramount to success. Of course, there are layers to the advanced study of the game. There are many things that both Smash and Pokemon don't tell you about or just hint at instead of making easily visible. For Smash, it's the aforementioned advanced techniques, whereas in Pokemon, it's IVs and EVs. But those are the aspects that you can change, and it can be just as important to know about the parts that you can't change. I am speaking, of course, of the levers and pulleys that make the machine go, indecipherable to most, but immensely enlightening to those who can perceive their mechanics. In other words, the game's programming. There are countless minutiae minutia in the construction of Smash that players have discovered. But knowing a Smash game's frame data is incredibly helpful. It can tell you whether a shield pressure sequence will catch certain escapes or whether an attack is safe on block. And of course, a large portion of top players understand these facts by intuition rather than knowing the exact amounts of frames something lasts. Pokemon, on the other hand, couldn't be more different. Pokemon players often know to the letter how each interaction will turn out if they know the circumstances, which is also just the nature of being a turn-based game. And it makes sense. With no execution barrier, the detriment of your skill can often come down to what information you know. When building a team, pro Pokemon players calculate exactly what moves their Pokemon will be able to survive, what opposing Pokemon they'll in turn be able to knock out, what they'll outspeed, and a whole bevy of other important benchmarks. And there's nowhere in-game where you can find this out. Eventually, of course, these calculations become second nature, and you still have to be wary of unexpected builds that might upset your calculations, but a good Pokemon player takes as many variables as they can into account beforehand and studies to make sure they've optimized their team to take advantage of the game as much as possible. But of course, even the most strident calculations can be thrown off course, and that brings us to one of competitive Pokemon's most notorious elements: hacks. No, I don't mean the infamous Captain Falcon turned fox turned box salesman, although he did get his name from this term. Hacks is what Pokemon players use to refer to luck, and oh boy, there's a lot of it. While competitive Smash has taken care to eliminate luck from tournament play as much as possible, and hey, that's why Pokemon has items and we don't, but that's simply not possible in competitive Pokemon. Imagine if the small bits of randomness that are hard-coded into how Smash plays, like Peach's turnips or Game & Watch's judgments, were baked into every single bit of the game. Pokemon is literally like that, so I guess it's like Hero, probably. And I'm not exaggerating. Even the standard damage calculations has 16 possible options. They may be clustered close together, but it's possible to quote-unquote hit a low roll when you needed something better, missing out on a proper KO. And that's just the most innocuous bit of hacks. And you thought Hero's critical hits were bad? Imagine them being possible on every move instead of just forward smash. Imagine getting completely incapacitated at random based on a 10% chance to freeze, or facing down the dreaded rock slide double flinch, which can honestly feel even worse than getting misfired on by Luigi. These are harsh realities of Pokemon that every player will face at some point. It's not possible to eliminate it from the game, and even if it were, Nintendo certainly wouldn't allow it. Now, I know that paints a dire picture of competitive Pokemon, but rest assured that it's not all doom and gloom. While every player has probably wanted to chuck their Switch because of hacks before, the upshot of hacks being so prevalent is that it's just another factor you include when planning for the long term. If your endgame plan can be ruined by one critical hit, you might often find a way to maneuver into a more fail-safe route. It's not that getting beat by hacks makes you a bad player, but finding ways to avoid it is a hallmark of being a good player. And while it might be a tough pill to swallow, hacks does have its place in competitive Pokemon. The incidental luck-based effects of many moves broaden with the width of playstyles available. Will you go for a more powerful move like Hydro Pump, or hedge your bets and set your Pokemon up with a weaker Skull that might burn the opponent and cause a huge shift in momentum? Look, huge disclaimer, I'm not saying hacks is a good thing. Competitive Pokemon would certainly be far less frustrating with no luck involved, but you could also argue the potential trade-offs, positive and negative, are part of what allows for such deep customizations and makes the preparation required all the more interesting. But yeah, if you ended up complaining after, say, a Darmanitan Icicle Crash flinches you 6 times to win, yeah, we get it. We've all been there, and oftentimes I wonder which is more frustrating, getting thwacked or getting crashed. We may have mentioned in that last section of the potential downsides of switching into moves a lot, but this is one of the hallmarks of competitive Pokemon: switching. If you ever watch a high-level competitive Pokemon match, especially in singles, you might be surprised just how much switching happens. Think of switching in competitive Pokemon as moving in Smash. It's how you position yourself for the win, consistently angling for the best situation. In fact, we can draw a fairly strong line between the concept of stage positioning in Smash and what some Pokemon players call board positioning in Pokemon. However, you maneuver your active mons and take into account your opponent's attempts to do the same. This is a complex concept to understand, but here's an idea that might help. What's the goal of the game in Smash? It is actually not, contrary to first glance, to deal damage to the opponent. It's to force them off the stage at any cost possible, no matter the damage. Likewise, the goal of competitive Pokemon is not to deal damage to the opponent per se, it's to KO all of their Pokemon. Now, obviously, KOing the opponent's Pokemon requires dealing damage to all of their Pokemon. Pokemon, but not all damage will be important. While percentage in Smash affects how far moves hit you, how defensive you can play, and what combos you can pull off, HP in Pokemon is just a resource. Not all damage is meaningful, and a core part of competitive Pokemon is being able to distinguish what is important damage, so that you're not focusing on damage that won't be useful long term, and so that you can be aware of when you can take a hit in order to reach your true goal of KOing the opponent. Here's a very basic example. Let's say you have 2 teams of Pokemon, and for simplicity's sake, it's singles, and there are 3 Pokemon left on each team. Player A has Aegislash, Cinderace, and Clefable, while player B has Hydreigon, Sylveon, and Excadrill. The 2 Pokemon out are Clefable and Hydreigon. Imagine you're playing from the point of view of the Clefable player, player A. The obvious move is Moonblast, right? Moonblast is 4 times super effective against Hydreigon, and Hydreigon's stab moves, or same type attack bonus, either do half damage or nothing to you. Easy decision, right? Well, not exactly. What if player B switches into Excadrill? They'll tank your Moonblast easily, and now they're in the strong position where they can fire off an Iron Head and potentially KO your Clefable. Okay, so on that turn, you switch to Cinderace, who resists Iron Head, right? But what if player B predicts that and Earthquakes? Then you're even more screwed. So what's evident here is that if player A lets Excadrill in on Clefable, they're in a bad position. So what's the solution? Well, you could use Clefable's Fire Blast, right? That won't do anything to Hydreigon, but it would catch Excadrill on the switch. But Fire Blast might let Sylveon in, who can then have its pick of healing up with Wish or using Hyper Voice to get some chip off. But in that case, maybe you can switch into your own Cinderace and start firing off speedy Pyro Balls. But of course, if they attack with Hydreigon's Dracometer when you switch, you get the picture. Pokemon isn't just about getting damage off, but rather it's about maximizing your damage and eliminating the opponent's options. In Smash terms, this translates to taking stage control. When you force an opponent into a corner, they have a constricted range of movement, and you can force them into a hard choice between 2 options with equally disastrous downsides. If their only options are roll or attack to get out with no choice of retreat, it will be much easier to anticipate their plan and counter it. The same is true in Pokemon. Force your opponent into the position that lets you win, not the one that has the most immediate payoff.
You have to push your advantage really well because Pokemon is a turn-based game. Every single turn matters a lot. And because Melee is so high-paced and stocks can kind of fly away, it can tend to be the same way about pushing your advantage, whether it be like holding center stage or making the most out of every single punish you get. And of course, comebacks are possible in both, but definitely a big theme is trying to push your advantage.
Of course, the route to victory can be expedited. Let's consider the hypothetical we brought up earlier, where you have an opponent in the corner in a Smash game. This is usually a bad situation because the opponent no longer has the option to back off. Although, of course, in some games like Melee, this isn't always true. But let's say it's Ultimate and going to the ledge isn't desirable. Your opponent's options are then in very simplified form. Roll, attack, jump, and wait. You can try to react to what they choose, but you've noticed them rolling every single time they're in this position. So you, genius Chrom player that you are, and best ledge trapper in the world, run back and F-smash. Game, set, match. You read them. Or maybe even conditioned them to think that option was safe, so it would pay off when it counted. This is perhaps the biggest point of crossover between Smash and Pokemon. These read and conditioning are the very lifeblood of Pokemon, where champions are made and where you could stunt on someone like no one else. Let's bring back that same Pokemon hypothetical, but this time let's assume that you've actually been in this exact position. Clefable versus Hydreigon many times before, and every time you have been, the opponent goes to Sylveon as you've Moonblasted, then healed up with Wish, frustrating you to no end. But this time you know their game, so you anticipate their own switch and go straight to Aegislash. Aegislash has a bad matchup with Hydreigon and an iffy one with Excadrill, but you can use their old actions to get it in on the one thing it safely can match up with 1v1. Now you've maintained the advantage position because you can fire off an Iron Head to hit Sylveon or a close combat to potentially hit Excadrill or Hydreigon. And if you get the prediction wrong, Sylveon isn't as big of a threat. This is where it all comes together. Pokemon is a game of constantly deciding how much you want to hedge your bets, jockeying for position as you weigh the pros of a big prediction against the mid-ground play. The little thought experiment we set up intentionally doesn't have one clear answer. You could also go to Cinderace anticipating Excadrill or wanting to square up against Sylveon, and the additional moves and items that might be in play could change the whole dynamic. What if that Excadrill is Adamant nature, which boosts its attack so it can KO your Aegislash easier? What What if Hydreigon has been hiding Substitute this whole time and uses it to gain momentum on your switch? What if the Cinderace has taken a bunch of damage already, so it can't 1v1 Sylveon anymore? Every turn is its own little battlefield, the layout shifting as different variables come into relevance. But if you're able to hold them off all in your mind at once and zoom out to see the entire lay of the land, then you can see which fights will end up with results that are ultimately inconsequential and which ones will decide the war. Now, I mentioned a lot of ideas in that hypothetical that might not seem obvious. For example, why does an Adamant Excadrill matter when attacking an Aegislash, who's weak to its ground moves? Well, Aegislash has an ability that lets it have higher defenses before it attacks, and bulkier builds of Aegislash will live through an Earthquake from Excadrill, even if it's Adamant, allowing it to KO it in return with close combat. But if it's specially oriented Aegislash, it won't be able to threaten Excadrill that much, even if it does live through an Earthquake. Knowing these minutiae is the equivalent in Smash to matchup knowledge. It's basically the same as successfully evaluating all of your opponent's threats and options so you know which might work best. And just like in Smash, some matchups are more skewed than others. This is true on a 1v1 level, but it also applies to your matchups against certain teams. This is a very common thinking applied to VGC, where entire strategies are crystallized so differently that they become almost like different characters you have to be prepared for. The goal, of course, is to have a fairly favorable matchup spread no matter what, but you have to consider that it's often better to have good matchups against the most common threats than to have fairly okay matchups all around, just like in Smash. For example, some Marth players in Melee say that he struggles with mid-tiers like Yoshi and Pikachu, but his very favorable matchups against the most common characters in Fox and Falco means that Marth solidly establishes himself as a top-tier threat. In Pokemon, the metagame changes far more often and has more permutations due to teams being assortments of 6, meaning anticipating and countering the strong strategies is a very strong strategy if you can pull it off. But they're honestly even more set in stone than in Smash, because what a Pokemon can do is already known to a point. Knowing your matchups and preparing well to tackle the most important ones is just as important in Smash. Speaking of matchups, let's go over some of the most common playstyles in Pokemon, and we'll try to draw comparisons to Smash along the way. You can break down teams into a few different, very broad categories along a sliding scale, from the most offensive to the most defensive. These archetypes are offense, balance, and stall. While these are the most basic archetypes, there are also, of course, teams that are more easily defined by one move or strategy. Weather abusing teams that set rain, sun, or sandstorm, or trick room offense teams that make slower Pokemon move first, which is basically the equivalent of a Bowser suddenly using Shulk's Monado arts to become the fastest thing on the planet and smack you across the stage. The style of team that you're predisposed to is very similar to how you might be inclined to choose a certain character or characters in Smash. Each type of team has its own stereotypes and personality traits, just like every main does. And if you're a stall player, don't expect to find a lot of sympathy. But the same mandate that holds true in Smash applies here too. Whatever gets the job done works. Of course, not all Pokemon and not all playstyles are created equal, and that's where we come to that old hallmark of the Smash scene, the word that launched 1,000 angry tweets: tiers. Just like in Smash, Pokemon players sort their Pokemon by tiers based on how viable they might be in competitive play. However, these tiers have a much greater impact on competitive play than in Smash. Outside of the odd low-tier tournament here and there, you can play whatever character you want in Smash. If you, the top-tier Joker player, run into a Little Mac, well hey, it was the Little Mac's decision to use him. But in Pokemon, tiers are actually defined rules about what Pokemon you can use. Pokemon is broken down into several different tiers, primarily based on usage. The baseline tier for normal play is overused, or OU. Under that is underused, then rarely used, and then never used. You get the picture. Above OU is the Ubers tier, for Pokemon that have been deemed too broken for the overused metagame. This tier frequently includes the box legendaries and other obviously overpowered creatures. This sort of object ranking of Pokemon is off-putting to some, but I'm guessing for Smashers who love to debate whether Kirby or King K. Rool is the worst character in the game, it comes naturally. The actual goal of these tiers is to allow players to play whatever Pokemon they want. With so many Pokemon in the game, some are inevitably outclassed by others or just can't hang with the big dogs. But in the lower tiers, you can play as Cherrim or Alcremie in a format where they might be able to shine, free from the tyrannies of the Dragapults and Excadrills of the world. Imagine if you were able to play K. Rool to your heart's content without worrying about the characters who simply invalidate him. Those are basically tiers. Of course, you can still use lower tier Pokemon in higher tiers if you want, and such strategies are sometimes undiscovered anti-meta reads, or you could just do it because you want to and love the challenge, similar to many low-tier mains in Smash. Finally, it's important to note that these very strict tiers only apply to Smogon singles. VGC operates on its own system. While doubles may still have some unofficial ranking on how viable Pokemon may be, these rankings don't affect which Pokemon are actually allowed to be used in any given format. However, that doesn't mean that it's just a free-for-all with all of the legendaries running around, at least not always. In the current VGC rule set, Zacian, Zamazenta, and Eternatus are banned, and only Pokemon from the Galar decks are allowed. And to loop it all back, that's what Wolfe is trying to do with, do I really gotta say the name again? The whole thing? Alright, Wolfe Glick's Pokemon Sword and Shield Super Smash Bros. Invitational. We joked earlier that it was playing Nintendo's games competitively that links these communities, but it's more than that. As the final part of the Smasher's Guide to Competitive Pokemon, you should know that here is a scene like ours that has had to rely on the goodwill and passion of its player base to become what it is today. And you should also know that the competitive Pokemon scene is a scene that knows what it's like to fend for themselves. And if that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. Thank you so much for watching. I know that was kind of long, but me and my writer Zane had a lot of fun making this video. I very much enjoyed putting it together, but I hope you're prepared to watch some really fun Pokemon tournament matches. And be sure to check out Wolfe Glick's Pokemon Sword and Shield Super Smash Bros. Invitational. The date and times and link will be on screen and also in the description down below. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. Thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and I'll see you all next time.